As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
One of the worst performances of my career, and they never doubted it for a second.
We all go a little mad sometimes.
I believe there's a hero in all of us that keeps us honest, gives us strength, makes us noble.
You just gotta keep living, man. Livin.
Son of a bitch. He stole my life.
I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
Welcome back to the Shot by Shot podcast. Today, we're going to be discussing a film which undoubtedly will be the best sports film of the year from a new Italian maestro, Luca Guadagnino, with his film Challengers. Oscar, you rank this as your favorite film of the year. Start us off. Why is this film so great, and why do people need to check this out if they have not already?
Yeah, so this obviously it's been delayed. It was meant to come out, I think it was like last September or something, and it was very kind of disappointing things. I've been looking forward to it. I think Luca's such a fantastic director in kind of like the romance area. He just takes these projects to a whole nother level, and this for me is definitely his best film, and the direction in this is absolutely insane. It turns tennis into this sweaty, horny, and electric film that is just such an incredible time for like just over 2 hours, and we're kind of moving in this non-linear narrative that is led by one of my favorite kind of lead trios in some time, who all put in their best performances, in my opinion, that I've seen from them. And yeah, Mike Faist, Josh O'Connor, and Zendaya just absolutely kill it. And Luca he goes God mode by the end of this film, and it's incredible to see, and people should absolutely see it because it's the score as well is just unbelievable.
Yeah, I'm like equally as excited about this. I was so happy coming at the showing of this because I went into I wasn't expecting it to be like the best movie of the year, honestly. Like I'm not like the biggest tennis fan, and I kind of tried to avoid the trailers in general, so I didn't know too much about it. Just the basic premise wasn't like fully exciting me. It was just the fact that it was Luca that was making it was like the main factor towards it, because I think, well, definitely now I think he's one of my favorite working directors right now. And he already was before, like Call Me by Your Name, breaking into kind of mainstream audiences with that, and then like he went on to make like two of the best horror movies of like recent times with the Suspiria remake and Bones and All, which Bones and All was one of my favorites of the year in 2022, which is such a strong year as well, which is on its own. So yeah, I've loved Luca for a bit now. So yeah, he was the main factor, like kind of just making me excited for like this in general. And I was completely wrong in not like thinking this was going to be great, because this is his best film as well. I think as well. It's I didn't go in thinking it was going to be special, and wow, it's like this is a great screenplay, great technical that really elevates it. And it's my second of the year. I'm not going to put Overdone. I don't think it's quite that good. But yeah, comfortably second. And honestly, one of the best of the decade that is that good. I know we speak a lot about recency bias, but I really don't think that's the case here. I think it really is that good. It's one of the best, or at least one of my favorites from this decade. So yeah, I really really loved it. It really shocked me. Probably the biggest surprise that will happen this year.
Yeah, I think I don't think I had the same level of anticipation that both of you did. Like I was definitely curious about it. It was just not one that like not anything that made me not want to see it. It was just it didn't have anything that was really pulling me in to get me excited in terms of before I saw the film. And then once I saw it, like by the time I saw it, it was at the end of the opening weekend, had heard so many positive reviews and so many positive reviews about the score, which always is a big selling point for me. So once I heard that, I'm like, all right, I'm locked in. And yeah, I think like a true Italian filmmaker, Luca Guadagnino understands the power of music and film and really does rely on his music a lot. There actually is a couple of things musically we'll talk about later that I think feel a little bit off, but for the most part, I think he delivers an incredible, great score from Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, and then in addition, Luca's direction of that music, of course, is great. And one of the things I love most about this film is that it's a trio of characters, and I like how every character is very flawed. And I think, there are some people who go into film, and what they really want is, characters who they're going to root for and characters who they find likable. And that's just never been the way I've looked at film. I just don't like to look at film that way, and I think it's more interesting to explore characters who are flawed, even though if they have some qualities to them that we don't personally like. So I think, if you're someone who cares a lot about liking the characters and wanting to root for the characters, that this might not be as much of a film for you. But overall, I think just Luca's craft he brings is like, this is an example of a director just getting a script going to the right director. Like, Luca is, I don't know if this film was written for Luca or if he kind of picked it up after it was written, but he is just so the right guy to direct this movie for so many reasons. And yeah, just back to the characters. Like, I just really find that all the characters have both good and bad qualities, which just makes them so much more interesting to me. And I think a big real strength, and I think the big major takeaway of the film is the characters. And yeah, overall, just Luca, I think, is very much, I'm a big fan of Italian cinema, and he's in a lot of ways like a modern. There's always been like kind of two branches of Italian cinema. There's been one which is like the Fellini, Antonionis, like the real kind of personal expression art house directors. And then there was always the other side, which really was pioneered by Pier Paolo Pasolini, who really was making films that were very controversial at the time, very sexually driven, and typically like really making films about like taboo things and kind of pushing those boundaries heavy. And of course, then his protege was a filmmaker who's had a lot of influence on me, which is Bernardo Bertolucci, who Luca Guadagnino actually worked as a cook at parties Bertolucci would attend. So there's clearly influence from him there. And I think Guadagnino is very much an extension of that kind of influence of Italian cinema, with always trying to really push boundaries in film and really like having kind of taboo relationships and taboo topics that other filmmakers would not want to explore. And he really is trying to kind of push where film's going there very much in the tradition of some of those other filmmakers who came before him. But let's get right into it. I think, like I said, the characters are such a big part of this film. And of course, Zendaya is one of the biggest stars today. So let's get right into her character of Tashi. Oscar, what are your thoughts?
Um, she's she's obviously kind of the center of this film. Obviously, we kind of open on them kind of on the tennis court, and we get that kind of shot on the wire that zooms straight in on her. So like right from the start, that like she is the center of this story. She is kind of the one almost pulling the strings on kind of both sides, but we're not really sure at this point, and maybe unless you've seen the trailers what's happened, because like we begin at like the end, like there's a couple of shots like before the like Warner Bros things come in. It's just like those slow-mos at the end of the film that I kind of picked up on a second time. But I think she does such a good job, and kind of this is like props to kind of makeup and hairstyling as well. But this goes for all of the actors. They do such a good job of like defining each of the stages of where we're at in the story, and like giving us like representations of kind of with their acting of like where they're at the where they're at that point in their lives, whether it's how they act, like they're childish, immature, and I think that works so well. And like I said, it goes out to all three of them, not just Zendaya, but she's just over the past couple of years just stepping up her career, obviously starring in probably the two biggest films of the year so far, and she's only going up from there. She puts in such a powerful performance in this, as we've seen with June as well, and I just want to see her in everything, because she controls the screen half the time whenever we see her. So yeah, I think she's just absolutely outstanding.
Oh yeah, Tashi's like maybe the most interesting character in it, because she really is the one that's most focused on like the tennis aspects, or really caring about it. Like you always get like senses that Art and Patrick don't care about tennis as much as her. Depending on where you are in the timeline, like seem to care less or more about tennis. But she always everything is about tennis for her. Like pretty much all the relationships in this is because of her kind of goals and kind of relying all of her self-worth on tennis. And I think that's like a big thing for her. Like obviously when she gets the injury, and that is kind of just taking away like all of her self worth basically, and she has to put it all into the relationship with Art, and it kind of puts all that like pressure on him to kind of go and do tennis, and that's where she gets like our self worth going on forward from that. Like just how good of a tennis player he is, and yeah, it kind of ruins tennis for art. I think of it, especially as they're like it kind of strains on their relationship. But yeah, she's a really interesting. Like you were saying, like, none of these characters are really like they all have aspects of them that are like really dislikable, and I don't get. I've been saying that like ruins it for people. I mean, I don't need to. I don't need to have like characters that are like extremely flawed in the screenplay, but it's not so like I don't dislike them because of like the choices they make. Like there's a lot of melodramatic moments in this, and like people have been calling them goofy, but I think Luca is so good with his actors that like they don't. It's not like laughing at it. Like if it still feels serious and like everybody's committed to it, and he's so good with getting them delivering these great performances that it like the screenplay just feels still so good. And I think the screenplay is great regardless. Like this would still be a great screenplay without Luca, like in the hands of a lesser director. But I think he still elevates this to like something so much more than it would have been. Like he doesn't even care about tennis. He cares about like the relationships, the kind of in-depth kind of view of the actual people playing the tennis. So, like I know he literally doesn't like tennis in real life. So I like you said, I don't know if the screenplay was written for him because he just doesn't like the sport or he has no interest in it. It kind of cares more about like the people and the characters, which all of these movies are pretty much been like character driven, like Call Me by Your Name, Bones and all. Like these are like genre films that like he puts like a lot of focus on like breaking down the characters and like really showing like the emotions between them and the relationships. So yeah, this was kind of perfect for Luca, I think, and it was brilliant. Even if I mean, I don't really care about tennis at all. So the relationship side and like the dramatic moments were like the stuff that I really liked.
Yeah, like I said, I think that the most common, like from people, most of the reception's been pretty positive, but the common thread I think throughout every kind of criticism of the film has been mostly that people didn't like the characters because they all are very flawed. And like Tashi's definitely very manipulative, and like she totally does manipulate both of them, but really especially Art, played by Mike Faist, I think his last name is. Apologize for mispronounced that, but
Feist, I think. I don't know if that's how you say it, but
but I think her redeeming quality is, I love her love of the game of tennis. Like she is an absolute competitor and she loves the game. And she's an athlete who her career was taken from her sooner than it should have been, which is it happens to a lot of athletes and a lot of, top prospects across all sports. And, no one loved this game more than her. And at the end of the day, everything she does, even if, we disagree with some of her actions, it's all for the better of the sport. Like tennis is a better game because she manipulated Art. Art is a better tennis player because of Tashi. And even though like she is manipulative, she is unfaithful to him, which might kind of turn some people off to her character. I think the thing that for me really like the real great quality in her character, in to me at least, is her love of the game. And I really do love how much this character like loves the game of tennis. And like even like there's between the major disconnect between her and Patrick is that like they'll use tennis as like a metaphor for flirting, and for Patrick he's talking about sex. Like it's just tennis being used as a metaphor for flirting, where when Tashi's talking about it, like it's strictly tennis. And I think even early on in that scene where they're all young at the party, it's like Art identifies that and uses that to his advantage because he really then cuts in and starts talking tennis with her, which is what she's actually interested in talking about. And yeah, like I think she's a competitor. She needs conflict in her life, and the whole thing of just I don't know if we spoil anything yet, but like we're gonna spoil the whole movie. Like it's if you haven't seen it, highly recommend go check it out in the theater and then come back and watch after because we're gonna spoil a lot. But when he says like, "Will you leave me if I quit tennis?" Like truthfully, like yeah, she probably will because she's a competitor and she needs some form of like conflict in her life. And Art is not, aside from tennis, is not someone who brings conflict into her life like Patrick does. Whereas Art, if there's no tennis, there's no conflict, and she's a competitor. She needs that level of like competition and like a challenge at all times. I think like she has no desire for love, and I like how typically like the cliche thing in films is like when there's a woman who's like the men desire, she'll have like a bright red dress, but instead Luca puts her in a light blue dress, which isn't like a romantic, emotionally like provoking in the same way as the color red. Like blue creates, it still makes her stand out and like clearly like shine in the frame, but at the same time, it doesn't evoke the same emotion that the color red would. And there's not that same sense of romance that the color red would create because Tashi's not desiring love is not what she desires. What she wants is to watch some good fucking tennis, as she says. And in the end, she gets what she wants and gets to watch some good fucking tennis. And in the end, that's really the driving force for everything she does. However, I don't think she's as calculated as people think to a certain degree. Like when Patrick leaves, there's genuine emotion from her. Like that was she didn't plan that. Like there was genuine emotion and she was genuinely upset when he walked out. And yeah, I think like there is moments where her emotion does take over. So I don't think it was like this master plan from the time they were kids, like a lot of people think. Like I do think like, but in the end, she gets what she wants. She all she wanted was to watch good tennis and make the sport better, and that's what she did. So even if you disagree with some of her actions, you can't. I just feel like you can't not respect the love of the game. But I think the best character to talk about next would be her husband Art, who is, I guess you could say, probably the protagonist of the film. I mean, you could kind of argue any of them are the protagonists, but he's definitely a very interesting character with a lot to unpack.
Yeah, he's definitely an interesting character, but I think compared to him and Patrick, he's a slightly more like reserved one. Patrick's a lot you see it a lot more in his immaturity, and Art is kind of he's almost the opposite of that. But I think part of this comes down to the way that Luca directs them, because I think, and obviously that's down to them to act, but I think both of them do such a good job at initially kind of creating this really childish look to them. You know, they're like when they're like celebrating, they go around just hugging each other like in the most random ways. And
I mean, the relationship between Patrick and Art is like equally as good as the relationship between the other characters. Like,
I think it's the best
what do you
relationship
think?
between
Because
those two.
yeah, do you think? I mean, there's so many like gay tendencies and stuff, and like get hints towards them, like them like being like actually like wanting to be together for the movie. But what do you like think about that?
That's I think that's one of the strengths of the film. You know, there's obviously it's just the way that Luca like directs them, the way they eat in front of each other, like how close they are to each other, what they're eating.
Yeah, I think in terms of like the comparing like the younger versions and the older versions, I think Mike Feist was like much more believable kind of as like the like 18, 19 year old, like they're in like college age. I don't know what age they're supposed to be, like early 20s. I think he looked much more like he was like that age, whereas Josh O'Connor slightly out of place, sort of. He looked much older even when he was in the college kind of days. But yeah, I really liked the relationships between all of them, like with like the kind of like bromance between him and Patrick is like so good at the start. And you can really feel that like they've been like friendship. I had a long friendship from like 12 or something. I think they said like they went to boarding school or something. Um, but I think the kind of like difference between them and Tashi is like really interesting. Like Alex was saying, because I mean it's kind of hinted that she's not coming from wealth, whereas though those two have like went to like a like boarding school where they were like I think they learned tennis from like a young age, so they've been kind of pushed into that path. Whereas for Tasha, it's kind of like a case where it's all or nothing, and she kind of needs to be the best. And I think she maybe cares more about security as well, because there's that scene where they're on the beach, and when they first meet Tasha and like Patrick doesn't really get why she's going to college, and she needs that like security behind it can't be just tennis. Like she kind of sees that it's not just for money and that she needs something to fall back on. So there's maybe that sense that it's not just about money. Whereas that's kind of what they've been brought up to kind of think about. He doesn't actually see it as like a passion or anything. So yeah, Art's kind of the nicer guy between the two, I guess. It kind of has the snaky moments where like you can tell he's definitely like got a big game plan of kind of stealing Tashi from his like best friend. So it's like the kind of big moments where like you really see the flaws in his character. I mean, there's never really moments where I start to hate people in this. It's kind of just like kind of funny how outrageous the stuff in it is. But yeah, that's kind of his big moment where like he kind of big plan to kind of steal her from him, and it works. So yeah, Art was probably maybe my favorite character. I really like Mike Faist. Like he was great in West Side Story. That's the other thing I've seen him in. So yeah, I really liked his character. Yeah.
Yeah, I
You,
do
Alex?
too. He was I've seen the Bike Riders that he's in. I saw at London Film Festival last year. He's really good in that. Even though he only has a small role. But going back to what I was trying to say, he just kind of by the end he just wants to be this dad character, and Tashi's kind of the polar opposite of that. And obviously it's quite a heartbreaking scene where she comes back and after she's cheated on him again. And he's just in bed with their daughter, and that just kind of whole scene just sums up everything really, and kind of the position that they're in. And I think Luca does a really good job with that. And we also kind of see the difference between him and Patrick. Art's basically in the friend zone for like years with Tashi. He's just there with her. I'm pretty sure it's years. I can't remember exactly. I think it was like 3 years or something.
Yeah, because it's
From
till the end
time
of
she has her
college, I
injury.
think.
I think it's like 3 years difference.
I think it's like hinted at though that like there's after the injury, like there was some time away. Like he looks kind of surprised to see her when we go to the one
Yeah.
flat before the dinner. So I think there was some time like apart too.
Yeah, but it's just I guess for him he's always wanted it. They both have, but yeah, and then yeah, like Ryan said, I think he probably is my favorite character in the film as well. It's just, and then all hell kind of lets loose in the last act after he's had enough. But yeah, Alex, what are your thoughts on Art?
You snakes. I can't believe both of you that's your favorite character. I'm riding with Patrick all day. That is 100% hands down.
They're all great. They're all
Fuck
great.
No,
Patrick sleeps with his best friend's wife. That's more snaky than what he did.
what do you mean? He snaked him first. It's fair game.
True.
They haven't spoken in years. It's so fair game. It's a dub. He should be sleeping with her. But yeah, Art's a fucking snake. But nah, so I do think he's an interesting character because all seriousness, because obviously like from the very start, like you can tell like he wanted her more. And like when they have that first tennis match that they're playing for her, like he's like slipping and like sliding, like he's trying way too hard to the point where it's throwing him off of his game. Where Patrick's kind of strength is he just doesn't give a shit about anything. So I think that, Art clearly like just when they're looking at her on the Adidas ad before they even meet her, like Patrick's like just kind of talking like, oh yeah, like she changed the game, but like Art's just like in a trance, just like so infatuated with her. Even from the very start when he first sees her, there's like that little bit of buildup in his mind from what Patrick says. And as soon as she walks on the court, this is like it's such a great character introduction. The music like drops hard in addition to the applause all at the same time. And this is like just great subtle filmmaking by Luca where he just makes her shine with what they do with her hair along with the sweat. Like she literally is shining as we're introduced to her. And because of course that's Art's POV. Like he's just subtly showing us how kind of infatuated with her she is. And when we're in those younger scenes, like we think like, okay, she obviously is probably likes Art a little more because we know that she's going to end up with him. Like this is not, or I'll get that later, but it like, and then there's that, like I said, he cuts in, talks about tennis. She stares at him a little bit longer at the end, but there's always this kind of curiosity to Tashi's eyes where they're all connected shots all over the shoulder. And it cuts pretty quick to where like we keep wondering like which connection's the strongest between these three. And so we do. So in the end, Patrick does end up winning the tennis match. He ends up dating her, and then we go to that one.
He snaked Art for that as well because he said he didn't even want to win that. He was going to throw the final before like they even met her. So he snaked him first.
Yeah,
And
listen,
then
it's the
you
game.
get like the the three-way scene where he's like, oh, what do you say? You remember when you said you were going to let me win? He's like, oh yeah, that's a lifetime ago, and he just smacks his dick. That scene's so funny.
Yeah, and then there's that we go to that one flashback and we just see him walk in to like see Tashi practicing, and we don't need to hear any words. We just know like we know he's a snake right there. I'm like, everyone knows what he's gonna do. And then the thing that the really like decision that makes it tough to root for him is when because also like Ryan said, like I don't like really like ever hate characters in movies for the most part. Like I don't take a judgmental approach towards movie characters for the most part, unless the character's like a rapist or something. Like I normally am like more just curious about the character rather than kind of judging whether or not I like them. But I think that the scene where he is in the cafeteria and he's literally like snitching on his best friend, I'm like, dude, this dude's a snake. But
Yeah, they're both snakes.
Yeah, they both are.
What does Patrick ever really do though? That's a snake move.
It's not necessarily a snake. Patrick's just more of this character that's like a whiny, immature. He's self-aware, which I'll give him that. He's like the only character that acknowledges
Ultra
that
self-aware.
he's an asshole and that he knows that he's done loads of wrong, which I think Josh O'Connor plays that to perfection.
I don't think he's whining though. What does he ever whine about?
Not necessarily whining, but well, I guess he's whining about those two, and you know, you just get that scene in Atlanta where he just goes and sits on the tennis court and just doesn't says anything. He just walks up and just sits there and stares at both of them. He's more like a passive aggressive kind of character, I guess. But I just think Patrick, like with Josh O'Connor, just like I was saying before, about the mannerisms, he's just such an erratic character, and we kind of see that throughout. You get that scene in the party where he's like explaining about how much he loves Tashi. He just got that Coke bottle in his mouth, like against his lip, and like the way they're eating the churros and the bananas and everything, and the hot dogs it's
the sexual
crazy.
tension between those two is like crazy.
It's absolutely crazy, the sexual tension between those two. And then you just get the like split second shot of when they're in the cafeteria and he like pulls his chair closer. Patrick pulls his chair Art's chair closer to him. But yeah, I just think as a whole, the body language that Luca directs in those two, especially from that first scene where they see Tashi, you just get that two shot on there, that kind of legs are spread slightly there, just staring in awe. And I think I think the concept of tennis is chosen so well because you just get shots of the audience looking back and forth, like everybody does watching tennis. And I think that's kind of used so well as kind of eyes wandering back and forth, like this spectacle of like watching somebody like they're in love. And I think those kind of two things work so well for the film thematically. But yeah, I think Josh O'Connor is such a fantastic actor in this, and he's not my favorite character, but I think he's like performance-wise might be my favorite.
Yeah, I think you said about like the back and forth when they're watching. I love when like they focus on a character and like they don't even care about the tennis. Like there's that first scene when they see Tashi, they're both just staring at her the whole time. And then in like the final tennis match as well, like Tashi's just like looking forward, like completely deadpan, like she doesn't really like care about the actual tennis match at that point. Like, that shot at the start where it like goes across the tennis like court. It's like I don't even, was it a zoom or was there actual like
it's on a wire
digital camera? I'm really confused. I was wondering how they actually done that because there's like tennis balls like flying past the camera and stuff. Like there's a lot of stuff that like I think
all the tennis balls are
there's a lot
CGI
of
in the film, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, they have to be because they fly like right at the camera.
Yeah,
like, so
I'm pretty sure they are.
Yeah, it's a pretty digital movie at times.
Yeah, to be fair, the VFX were like for the tennis. I thought they were done really, really well. Obviously, I don't watch tennis, and I know there's been like a lot of people complaining of the people who love tennis, and that's why I say the best sports films are always the sports that you don't care about. And I think that's the point because people are too set and focused on sports films being the actual sport. And I think it's much better to make it more cinematic and interesting and electric, just like Luca does with this, than be properly realistic and every point and like every. Because I know people are complaining about art being like a massive Grand Slam champion, won loads of things and like that, and like, oh, he wouldn't be in this position. Like, I don't really care, to be honest. I just, the rest, like, the film is incredible. But yeah, those and then like the other day, someone from behind the scenes that speaking about the visual effects and stuff, there's like the photo of when Tashi breaks her knee, they built like a replica of her body, just legs down.
It's crazy.
And they that's what the shot of the knee is breaking, is that replica, and it's really
Did you see this, Alex?
uncanny and weird, just seeing like a half,
So
just
cool.
half a body of just they had that they made. But yeah, it's so cool.
Yeah, I think the real quick, the tennis part, I think, is that the problem of the movies I dislike most are bad adaptations of something I love. You know, and whether it's like a book you've read or whatever, when you have any pre-existing idea of something going into a film, I feel like you're normally going to enjoy it less. And I think that the tennis, understandably so, runs into that problem for people who actually are a fan of the sport. Like, but when you kind of don't have your own pre-existing idea like you would with whether it's a sport or a book or whatever, you're typically going to be able to enjoy it more, I think.
Yeah, and I get that. Like, if there was a football movie, I'd probably hate it, or like the actual football parts.
Correction. He means soccer, not football. He means soccer.
No, real football.
No, we mean football.
That'd be American football.
Like Gran Turismo last year, I absolutely hated that film. But to be fair, I did love Ferrari, and I do like Ford versus Ford v Ferrari as well. But yeah, Gran Turismo sucks. Bad film.
I totally get that part, like, side of it, but like it doesn't focus on the tennis. Like I was saying, like it focuses on the characters. Like whereas you'd be like somebody watching in the court or on the stands or whatever, like watching the actual tennis. Like I don't feel like there's that many moments where like it actually focuses on like hitting it back and forth that you can like criticize their form or anything. Like it's always focused on, like, even at the end, it's like slow-mo shots of their face. Like it's really focusing on like the emotions and like those like small moments with like the actual people, like rather than like hitting a ball over a net or so I don't really know what you would criticize.
Like going back to like the writing and the character, I've heard a lot of people have been discussing about how kind of cringy and corny they think the film is. I know kind of Ryan and I have said, for me, absolutely, I didn't find any of it cringy or corny, and I'm almost struggling to see where and why people think that. I know it's a melodrama, but Alex, I'm interested to see what kind of your side of that is. Did you find any kind of parts of the writing cringy with like regards to the characters?
I mean, yeah, kind of. Like the script I've said was not my favorite part of this film, but I think, like I said, like it just went to the right director, and I think Luca knows how to deal with it. I think that dialogue is typically only as good as the actors who deliver it for the most part. Like, don't get me wrong, there is some dialogue that exists in films that are just simply bad dialogue, but I think mostly it's all about how the actor's going to deliver those lines. Like a good actor can make most, not all, but most dialogue work, I think, or a bad actor can make most dialogue sound shitty at the same time. So I think that, Luca does a good job with it. And I think he kind of understands that some of it's a little melodramatic and just kind of embraces that with like his techno score and all that stuff. Like, I think that, like, I'll put it this way, none of it's enough to like ruin the film for me. Like, none of it's enough that like it's really going to hurt my experience of it that much.
Which parts in particular had you have any noted down?
Because I can't. I'm like you. I can't even think of like what could be, apart from like maybe like if you were awkward in the kissing scenes or something like that.
The only slightly awkward moment is when he's on that date with a girl trying to get a room, and he just randomly just goes in for a kiss. That's the only part that is slightly awkward for me. That's about it.
It'll come to me. Like I mostly try to focus on the positives more than the negatives.
That's fair enough.
Yeah, I'll try and think of something though.
That's fair enough.
That day is funny. It was like the letterbox review. It was like the most unrealistic thing. They like got a match like instantly on Tinder.
Oh yeah, the thing that I said. How quickly got a match on Tinder. That was the only unrealistic part of the film. So funny.
But yeah, I think about the sport of tennis, like it kind of is like Raging Bull. It clearly is very influenced by Raging Bull in that it's very much uses the sport as a way of its expression of the characters through the sport rather than the sport being like the core of what the film is itself.
De Niro's
And
character in that is like so hateable as well. Like that's another point. Like, are you gonna
oh,
hate
totally.
Raging Bull because he beats his wife and other
Thank you.
stuff? Like exactly. Like
Exactly.
I don't see why you like hate the movie because the character's bad.
Yeah, you absolutely just hit the nail on the head, which is why I'm like, I totally hate the mindset. Like, I enjoy so many of my favorite films have characters who do things that like I wouldn't personally do. Like, I hate, I truthfully hate the idea that like characters need to be likable, and like I think all the eras that put like emphasis on that, like qualities of film suffer because of that. When we go through there's always like a pendulum of Tarantino talks about it of like a lot of films focusing on likable characters versus like very flawed characters. Like the 70s ultra flawed, 80s was like ultra safe, ultra likable, and I love 80s movies. Like it's a golden age for blockbusters, which
Best
like
decade. Best decade.
nah, I love it, but like it's too limited. I think that there's just not enough variety to call it the best decade.
There's
It's
not a
the
lot of
best.
Nah,
independent like
there is. There
movies.
is some insane the 80s films. I know like
Yeah, it's great.
more of them I'm talking about maybe lesser known than like loads of the popular ones because obviously like you said that's a big blockbuster year. There's a lot of popular films in the 80s, but man, like outside of that, the 80s is unbelievable.
Real quick, I think just to clarify, you correct me if I'm wrong. I think you're more referring to a lot of like the European films of the 80s, though, like
Yeah,
Van
yeah,
and those things.
yeah.
Whereas like the American Hollywood films of the 80s, it was golden era for blockbusters, but like the 70s and 90s had so much more range to what was coming out, I think, in
Yeah,
Yeah,
America.
I
like
guess
the
so.
Oscars and stuff. The Oscars, they were like desperately trying to even find like movies that like they would take serious because it was all blockbusters. And like the year the Raging Bull was in like contention, there was like literally like two independent like serious movies that
What
like
year
they
was
were
that? 80 or
trying to strike
81?
1980.
80.
1980.
And still didn't win, which actually should have been an easy year at the Oscars because that's a stacked year. They just fumbled the bag there because like The Shining didn't even get a nomination.
That's
Yeah, it's
crazy.
ridiculous.
But yeah, I hate the idea that like characters need to be likable or someone who just agrees with us. Like I think it's much more interesting when the character has a mix of good and bad qualities. And like Ryan said, like De Niro in Raging Bull is like has a lot of really, really not great qualities to him. Like yeah, that is a character who like and there's a lot of people who don't like Raging Bull for that reason. They're just like, he's just the guy's an
Raging Bull
asshole.
is a bit hard to watch. Like he really is like a hateable character. Like I mean, it doesn't
They
ruin the
should
movie
watch
for me,
Cape
but like
Fear
that.
then. That's like next
Cape
level
Fear
De
is great.
Niro
Oh
hated
yeah,
character.
That's
uh,
definitely the biggest scumbag De Niro
yeah,
ever
like
played is Cape Fear.
Hmm.
But
Oh god.
yeah, like so yeah, I agree. I hate the idea that the characters need to be likable. And like I said, every character here I think has some redeeming quality. And I think like art like I said, like I've called him a snake multiple times, but like the thing that makes it complex is that he loves her more, he wants her more at the end of the day. So it's like his friends with her, but like clearly he is the one who clearly loves her and wants her a whole lot more than Patrick does, which makes it a little more complicated. Like I don't personally like think he should have, snitched on his friend, but at the same time, it's like it does make it more complicated and leave you with more to think and talk about. And I think the biggest redeeming quality of art is that I love his ambition. Like he's a winner, and like I like that scene where they're in the sauna and he's like, like I'm just stopping through. Like you live here. Like we're not like you think just
Hmm.
because like we came up together. Like you're my peer. He's like it's like yeah, like dude, he's a fucking he worked hard and he climbed to the top of the mountain where Patrick didn't have that same drive and ambition. And that's something that did make me root for art is that even though there's a lot of scenes where I think I more would side with Patrick. I think that I love Art's ambition and like his drive and his desire to win. I think is like his redeeming, admirable quality, and like those are the moments that made me like kind of want to root for him more because like he's a winner, he has the drive, he has the ambition, he's the champ because of that, and that's why he's the one who ends up with Tashi is because like he wanted her more at the end of the day, and Josh O'Connor never really wanted anything that much. He didn't want a championship. He
Hmm.
didn't want Tashi. He didn't want a lot. He just never had that same drive and ambition that Art did. And so I think that's really the major redeeming quality, uh, at least in my mind. And
Yeah,
what's up?
I kind of see like Art's character almost comes like full circle to what Patrick's character was at the beginning of the film, because he kind of obviously kind of loses his interest in tennis. He just wants to be a dad. He just wants to use the money he's got, and kind of at the start when they're at that party, Jessica and Tashi's saying, "Oh, you don't know what tennis is," because obviously he has that serve, and she sees it as making his own style out of tennis, and she doesn't really like that. And he just explains as he just wants to go pro as quick as possible, so he doesn't have to get a real job, as he calls it. He's just there because he's kind of lazy almost in that sense. So the kind of difference is right there, and I like the way that they use the non-linear kind of storylines, because it almost makes the kind of bit with Art at the end and Patrick at the start happen at the same time in the film, and we kind of see those kind of ideas start to come similar, even though they're at polar opposite ends of the narrative time-wise. But yeah, and like you said about Tashi, the kind of the scene when they're at college, when they're making out, they're like, "Oh, we're always talking about tennis." That's what she says, and he kind of goes off at her about not being supportive of her. She's like, "Oh, you're not in my fan club, are you?" And she just doesn't like that in a sense. But yeah, I think they're really, really, really well written characters, and I think the conflicts between them work so well and developed well. And I think that obviously, I don't think it would work near as well without that non-linear narrative, because I really think that really kind of merges all these kind of ideas together and motivations for our characters. But yeah, it's just really impressive from a writing standpoint.
Real quick, I
The
actually don't.
non-linear really took me by surprise. Like I expected it to be a lot more straightforward of a story going in. And
I
you
think I
said
knew it was
the thing that
non-linear
Very
going in.
nonlinear. I think it's actually very straightforward, to be honest. Like it's we have like the main we start at the end and we're going backwards, but like it's really the flashbacks are the narrative, and that's pretty straightforward. I actually don't think it's that nonlinear necessarily.
Mm, well, I mean, it technically, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, well, technically it is non-linear, but I get where you're coming from. Also,
the
interesting thing,
flashbacks are linear, like in their own path. You mean?
yes, they are. I'm interested to see what you guys think, because obviously there's been a bit of discourse around like the use of like timestamps, or like this much earlier. People, and I kind of agree with this. I don't necessarily like them, and because I think the hair and makeup department and clothing department do such a good job of visually telling us how old our characters are through like hair and makeup. Like I said, I'm interested to see where you guys stand on that kind of thing, because I think visually they do such a good job at kind of representing each time zone and how old each of our characters are without having to use those timestamps that we see, because I think it's starting to get a bit in your face, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. It is really easy to tell, like most of the time. I think like their hair's down. Like Zendaya looks really young, like in like the
Mm,
past versions. So I think there's
mm,
never like moments where you wouldn't be able to tell, and the timestamps are like they get a bit ridiculous. Like there's a time when they go like back years, it says, and then like it cuts like one week later. Like there's like stuff like that that like,
mm,
really just wasn't necessary. And
mm.
I mean that's probably a studio thing making them
Yeah,
put
I
it in,
think so.
because like I said, I mean most stuff isn't non-linear. I know Alex said it's not complicated. Like it's still like kind of streamlined. Like it's not hard to understand. Like the flashbacks are all linear, like in their own kind of path. Like it doesn't jump about all the time, but it's still different to like what movies tend to be. So they probably forced them to do that to kind of make it easier to understand. But yeah, I do wish it wasn't in there.
Yeah, I mean, I like films that deal with the passing of time and like span over like a long period of time and see how the characters evolve. And I think he does a really good job with that. I know Martha McFly in her review mentioned Jules and Jim, as I think I see so many similarities with that film and how it deals with kind of like the youth into adulthood and the relationship between the three characters. As for, so I love the passing of time element. As for the timestamps and all that, like, I mean, did I love it? I think it needs to be there. Like, I mean, no, I probably wouldn't have done it, but like, it doesn't really matter. Like, is this really what like people are talking about? Like, if you walk out of a film and your complaint is timestamps, like, sounds like the movie was probably pretty good, or you just
Yeah,
really
no,
looking for
I think
anything.
that's where people are coming from. Like that's like the only minor complaint that I've seen from people who are loving it. That's like the one slight problem that they're having. And I think it's not just this film. I think it's like more generally. I guess I think it's like I just wanted like to get rid of them to urge filmmakers to be more visual in that sense and like using the hair and makeup department to age characters well enough to be able to tell the difference. And there are plenty of filmmakers and hair and makeup stylists who are absolutely capable of that.
Yeah, it's fair.
I really did love that they done it like this though, like centering the whole romance, like conflict around like this final tennis match. I think it's a really brilliant idea, and I think it has a really strong screenplay. And there's also like there's that like main tennis match at the end, but like the whole thing is like it's like one big tennis game. Like I think that's like what Luke is like. He's not focusing on like tennis. He's focusing on like he's like it's as if like tennis is sex and it's like sweaty and emotional and like
Yeah.
everything. It's like we get like if we get like a backstory and like Patrick gets into a relationship with Tashi, like he then starts to like winning that final tennis game. And then when Art like ends up going into a relationship, but like, he starts to like make a comeback in the final game. And I like really love that aspect of like it, like going back and forth and like all affecting each other. Like you said, like we don't find out that he actually slept with her until like right before we see that moment where he like does like the serve. And I don't. How did you? I know, Oscar, you didn't think it, or you like forgot about it, but like when he brought it up,
Yeah.
when he's like telling him if he slept with Tasha, like I instantly thought that's going to come back up, but the whole time I kept waiting for Patrick to like serve because I thought he was just going to use it to like put him off and say like, oh haha, like I slept with your wife like 10 years ago or whatever it is. Like I wasn't thinking that they're going to sleep together in the future. So like, did you just remember that
Yeah.
they even like brought that in?
Sometimes there's just like things like sometimes you're concentrating too hard and you're like, and then you come back there and I was like, oh, how have I not picked up on that? But yeah, it's kind of a Chekhov's racket kind of moment. I didn't. It didn't even click for me until about 10 seconds after it happened at the end. I was like, oh, why is he doing this? And then that
was
scene just
on the edge of my
I was like,
seat
oh my
every
God.
single time. Like I was waiting for him to do it every time anybody like served the ball. Like I was like looking out to see who it was that was like serving it. Like I mean, he really added so much tension to like that final match.
Yeah, I think I love my like visual storytelling pieces, and this is great. I know people were. This is one of the big issues that people are having about they just think it's way too obvious and way too handheld of kind of a moment that's written in. But this I think it's just such a satisfying moment, and there are filmmakers and writers out there who would have done this in such a worse way, and this is I think is done so well, and I think it's deployed at just the perfect moment. And like Lucas shows in this film like how to use slow-mo properly, because there are some filmmakers out there Zack Snyder who do not know how to use slow-mo effectively, and this is
20-minute
such a
like
good
farming
example.
scenes.
Oh God. And people are having big problems like, oh, he's slowing down the sport of tennis. Like this is a movie. We're not watching a live tennis match. This is something completely different. And that racket moment is, like I said, it's just so satisfying. And then his Art's like complete change of character as soon as that happens. He's just stood there still, and he's like, "Oh, fuck it off!" When that kind of moment happens, and yeah, I
And then
think
that gives
that, like I
Patrick the
said,
match point, doesn't it?
Yes,
Like
and
in
like you were
swearing.
talking about that kind of that the film being centered around the last tennis match. Obviously, it's a three-set match centered around. It's like three-set match, three acts, and like, obviously the three of them. I think it just works so well as kind of a central narrative point. And I like the scoreboard that they have as well, that you see on the screen. And coincidentally, like both scores in both the first two sets are just the same, just flipped the other way around. I think one of them wins 2 and then 6, and then it is 6 and 2 the other way around, like that. But yeah, it culminates into such an explosive kind of final set and match point, which Luca just elevates everything he's done into just so tense, on edge of your seat, and is so good. Is so good. But yeah, so clever.
Yeah, I think I haven't heard that criticism that like they slowed down tennis. Like, what the
Oh
fuck are
yeah,
we talking about? Like,
Oh
what
yeah, I
sport?
seen someone say it wasn't realistic. Like,
yeah.
it's a movie.
What a stupid fucking criticism. But I think, yeah, like as a sports movie, like this is like a real like actually what most sports movies are gonna do is they just will hire a couple stunt guys for a day or two. They'll just shoot a couple plays from like a few angles and like just to kind of show you that the sport is there and exists. Whereas like there's real story beats. He's really photographing the game in so many different ways and trying like tennis is literally just back and forth hitting it. It's not like a sport like, like football or like hockey where there's a lot of different plays and ways it can go. Like tennis is pretty straightforward in terms of what it looks like visually. So to make it like to find that many different ways to photograph the game is a challenge in its own right. And he evolves the way he photographs the game entirely throughout the film so well and shows you just he photographs the game in such a variety of ways and saves each kind of style for specific story beat moments to elevate what's going on with the characters. And I think just anyone who wants to make a sports film, like you just simply have to look at this film and like it really is, it's because it's fu so it's funny because like, it's definitely one of the best sports film, but Luca Guadagnino clearly has no respect for the sport of tennis at the same time, because right away, like, in the very opening, he shows you, like, I know, like, I'm sure if you're a fan of tennis, you probably already exited this video or really don't like the way we've been speaking about the sport because I don't think any of us are fans of it, but right away, it's like he shows you the tennis match with no music, and it's just a back and forth, and it's so dull. And then in the very beginning, then he needle drops, starts the camera movement, starts like using like camera movement, music, and making it visually interesting. As then we move into Tashi because she's what make in terms of the way Luca Guadagnino is portraying it. She is what makes tennis interesting. Tennis on its own was like this objective view, boring game, and we move into her now. It's interesting, and like he definitely believes that the people are what makes it interesting. I don't think he makes it very clear. He has no interest in the sport of tennis on its own because he multiple times shows it as you would see it on TV and it's really dull. And then he'll like needle drop and use music to kind of heighten the sport and make you very aware of the fact that he's heightening the sport that he and some of us think is not the most entertaining. I do think it's interesting also, like, the politeness and, like, repressed emotions of tennis as a sport because, like, I'm used to hockey where, like, there's a lot of aggression. Like, when you're angry in hockey, like, you're yelling at each other, like, you're like it's a very, like, shit gets heated. Whereas in tennis, like, I forgot the fact that, like, when he starts, like, any lash out of emotion, like, he loses a point for it. Like, there's warnings and stuff like that where I forgot about that element of the game of tennis is how like polite and like repressed an emotion it is because most sports are very like heated, high emotion, lots of arguments. Where the fact that their emotions need to be repressed and the way Luca heightens those emotions, which makes it more difficult for the characters to repress them, I thought was really interesting in terms of making that sport stand out and be unique from other sports films. And yeah, I just think, like I said, like in the end, the entire narrative of the story all just leads to one thing. It was just because Tashi wanted to watch some good fucking tennis. I actually mentioned Art's kind of the protagonist. I was wrong. Like Tashi, like the whole thing is clearly from Tashi's POV, and there's multiple examples of this. Like after what was it? think it was after one of the scenes with Patrick when we cut back to like the real time, like the final tennis match with Tashi, all the heads are turning and like it's a wide shot and her head's just not moving, which really shows like she is feeling that emotionally. She is kind of stuck in a trance and something has persuaded her to like take her attention away from tennis. So that one like reveals a lot about her character, but at the same time, it really shows us that we're in her POV for pretty much the whole film, I think. And all she wanted was to watch some good tennis, and that's what the entire narrative was building towards. So I think the way it incorporates the sport into the entire film, I think, is a huge strength of this film.
I think, and there's a shot that pretty much sums up everything you've just said. The double split diopter shot, like that. My jaw literally dropped. Like
It's so
seeing that,
good. No,
I could not. And,
it's
like
so good.
like
It's,
Tashi in the middle, and then both the boys on the left and her right. Like it sums up the whole movie in like that one shot.
and
It's
then
just,
like in comparison with like the very final scene where Art jumps over the net, because that's like basically where the split diopter is placing her, is in the middle of those two. And then there's actually there's like two split diopter shots like back to back. You get one that's more zoomed out, and then you get the one that's been online. It was in one of the trailers or something that's more zoomed in. But yeah, I hadn't seen that. And like you said, my jaw was on the floor when that happens, because split diopter is just the greatest thing ever. And like going back to what I was saying, like Luca going off the charts and like the final, like obviously we get the tennis ball POV shots, which are just the most satisfying thing ever. And just I would love to know how we got to do that, because it works so well. And then obviously he kind of goes full out of it with the underground shots, which I'd also love to know how he did as well, because I think those looked absolutely amazing. And just I know it almost breaks the element of filmmaking, and I know there are a lot of people that don't like those kind of shots that like take out a wall or something, or like overhead that like takes out a roof, that we've seen in many films before. But it adds levels
Go
to
watch some boring
direction.
chamber piece.
Mm.
Like if you hate those shots, go watch some boring talking movie and some.
it makes the whole
Yes.
thing so much more cinematic. Like
Yeah, I
it's
agree.
crazy. Like even like the overhead crane shots, like when they go between them, when they're like during the breaks or whatever it's called, like it'll go between Art and Patrick, like going over the umpire. Like I love those shots. Yeah, I'm curious how they've done the split diopter. Like, is it composited in and like post? Because
I think
those are like really
I
far
think
away
it's a
from each
fake
other.
split diopter.
Yeah, I don't think you could do it. Like that would be too crazy. They're so far away from each other, like on the court. And, like,
Yeah, still
No, yeah,
so
it's
cool.
totally
Like,
fine.
split diopter, it looks sick.
yeah, and I mean we need to give a little praise to the cinematographer. I don't know, Sayombo Moktiprum. I don't know if that's how you pronounce
Yeah,
his name properly. But yeah,
incredible.
he's worked on a lot of great films, and he's working on M. Night's Trap this
Trap.
year, which makes me even more excited for that,
Yeah,
because he really elevated like the whole final match.
I agree. I think the whole film looked incredible, and Luca's like composition working with the cinematographer just like levels almost to his other direction. Not that it was bad at all. It's just it just feels like something whole new and fresh, from that perspective, and it just really shines. Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah, I think they
Shot on
also
film
have.
as well, which we don't see often anymore. So it's cool to see.
Mm,
Yeah, we also have those like when he shows a lot of like close-ups and medium close-ups, like there's these weird like extra low angles which just feel
mm,
different from like what we're used to. Like there's are also like a little bit to the side, like they're not totally in front of the character. So like he has these very distinct kind of extra slightly low angles. And he does play around with like angles really well. Like in the scene where getting dinner, it's Art and Tashi where they're at like that they're getting dinner and the question like it's a normal conversation and then when the question at the end gets brought up of if he's still in love with her, there's just subtly a low angle on Tashi and subtly a high angle on Art And like that's something, of course, a lot of filmmakers use frequently, but Luca kind of saves it for that moment and only really uses it there. He uses it again, like sometimes, like they're a little more noticeable angles, but like in the sauna, of course, and he like with Art at the low angle and Patrick at the high angle. But I think he uses eye levels frequently, like in the cafeteria scene, like Tashi's eye level is much higher than Art, and it's much higher than his a lot of the time. But then it's like you have Art's eye levels higher than Patrick, but then Patrick's eye level is higher than Tashi. So it's like this kind of triangle of each of them like has a high angle with one character and a low angle with the other. So the way he plays at eye levels is pretty interesting to kind of make them all have an advantage on one and like a disadvantage on the other to a degree. So I think that's pretty interesting that he does. He loves high angle shots too, and they're the type of high angles I like that I don't think it's used enough. Where it's like a long shot where you see their full body and it at a high angle. But when most people have like a high angle, either be like a close up high angle or like a extreme long high angle, like kind of like something you'd see from Denis, where like they're tiny in the frame, but they're not tiny in the frame. Like it's like full body filling the frame, and he uses those high angles, which I don't think are used enough. He really likes using those a lot, and yeah, definitely like some good cinematography here. From Sorry, oh yeah, and then actually, real quick, one thing is they also just the hair, makeup, and wardrobe from the very beginning feels so distinct, and like in terms of Lucas direction, like you just know you're dealing with the specific vision director from the very start of the film.
Yes, I have a couple more things to add. Going back to the kind of the filmmaking in the last act, I love you kind of get those really out of focus, shaky zooms, particularly on Patrick and Josh O'Connor's character that I absolutely love. The focus is kind of dipping in and out as the tension is building up. I think it looks so cool, and the camera is shaking slightly. And I think that works so well. But the one of the biggest strengths of the film for me is the editing, which I know I saw a couple of weeks ago some really stupid tweet. I think a clip got posted. I think it was the scene with Art and Tashi in their one of the hotel rooms, and people were like complaining about how many cuts there were. But I think the editing is used so well in this because of how many cuts there are and how you kind of got the reflection of tennis, the back and forth between the two characters, and then you kind of get sequences where the editing changes pace and they're lingering on the shots a lot longer. And I think just like the use of like eyes and staring, like both reflect the sport of tennis, but use it in a way for kind of love almost, and reflecting the characters and their obsession and the tensions that is kind of boiling over. But yeah, the person that complained about that on Twitter was very wrong, because I don't usually like kind of a lot of cuts in film, because I do like shots lingering on, but when you're using editing that's actually got a purpose like that, lots of cuts and back and forth between characters, I think it's used really well. But yeah, I just wanted to mention the editing. So good.
And that tweet said like open the film schools or something, as if like Lucas a bad director. No wonder you stay off Twitter, Alex.
God.
It's
Yeah, anytime I hear
Schools.
anything about Twitter, I'm thankful I'm not on that shit platform. But
Yeah, it's awful.
was that tweet by any chance about I know you said the hotel room, but was it by any chance about the scene outside the hotel in the alley, kind of where they're
no,
against
it's the argument between Art and Tasha before she leaves to sleep or shoot on
Yes,
him.
it's the scene where
Oh,
Art's
okay,
like go like, oh, can you like stay with me and like fall asleep, where he's like lying on her lap, like, and like going back to that scene, I've forgotten about that scene. Like Tashi's like got like control over Art at that point. She's like even just on like the body language, she's like she's towering over him, and he's lying down on her lap at that point. He's kind of lost all momentum, and he just wants to quit.
And right before that, when he tries to tell her that he's going to quit tennis, he really is like kind of arching above her, like over the door frame. She's on the bed, and then he kind of submits to her after that in that scene. So yeah,
I mean, she has
that's
control
very
over
good.
him the entire film.
Yeah, he like almost tries to take control over the relationship and like instantly loses it. It's so good.
But yeah, actually, real quick, she brought that up. I do think the scene where Tashi and Patrick are talking like outside, where he wants her to coach him, that scene, I was like, that scene felt like poorly edited. Like something every just felt so off. Like it didn't feel like they were speaking in the same room to me. I was questioning if Luca maybe did that intentionally because he wanted it to feel like disconnected. Maybe like I wasn't sure. I agree with Oscar for sure that like I normally don't like films that overcut, but it's not really the overcutting that I mind in films. It's the lack of like calculation and precision where like Luke
Mm.
is changing the angles he's cutting back and forth with based on story beats. Like I said, like that when they're young and at the party and there's the over the shoulder shots and it cuts frequently. I think it's good to keep that curiosity of like who she's looking at more. So like I don't mind his cutting here. Like I think there's a calculation to it. That one scene in the alley that felt like so like kind of off to me in terms of editing. Like it didn't feel like it felt very unnatural, but I was questioning if maybe Luca did that intentionally. I don't know, but that's why I was curious if that's the one you were thinking of.
No, no, it wasn't. It's an interesting because I think the editing in that sequence is interesting because we kind of start with like loads of back and forth about over the shoulder shots, and then it kind of moves into just like one shots of them after like a certain point. It's just showing one of them rather than both of them in the same shot. And then, but I didn't have a problem with that. I thought that was really good that sequence. But yeah.
Backtracking a bit because I don't think we really got to talk about my guy Patrick, played by Josh O'Connor. I want to talk about him a bit because I think he's that's so. Tyler from Real Talk said in their review that he saw that like 80% of people were rooting for Art, and that really surprised me because in that final match, I was thinking there is no way anyone is still rooting for Art at this point. Like I
Mm.
truly didn't think like, and I know obviously that like I know he's going to throw the match for Art. Like, I don't think Luke is playing it for plot twists. So, like, it's not a criticism like it's been from some people. But like, obviously, you know he's going to. But I'm just in my head. I'm like, smoke him, smoke him. I'm like, just like fucking. I just want to see Josh O'Connor just smoke him in the match at that point. I know it's not going to happen, but that's what I'm like hoping for. But I think, he's like he really doesn't take so I had issues with his character writing because I'm like, why would he throw the match? Like that just feels so out of left field and unjustified. Like thought at first there were flaws in his character writing. Then when I rewatched, I realized like now like his character just really doesn't give a shit like about anything. So it's like, yeah, like you know what, he wants it more, let him have it. Like he just cares so little. But I think that's also kind of what makes him like a likable character is that like he's always joking, always smiling. Like even when he catches Art, he's just like, "Oh yeah, like I know what you're doing. Like you're waiting for me to fuck up," and like he's laughing about it. He's like, "All right, like let's like embrace the competition." There's never any hatred from him towards Art. Like Art's the one who hates him, but like there really is never any real hatred from Patrick. And Josh O'Connor, I just saw him recently before I saw this film in La Camera, which is a great Italian film that came out last
Really
year.
excited for that. It looks really good.
Yeah, it was a very interesting film, and I thought he did a very, very good job there, and he was definitely an actor that I was curious to see what he would do going forward. And in this one, like, yeah, he's definitely proving himself to be like a top tier younger actor right now. So
Mm.
yeah, I'm definitely he's a great actor. I'm curious to see what he's doing. But I also realized, like I said, these characters are flawed, but like Josh O'Connor's only real flaw isn't like a dislikable quality. It's just like his lack of ambition in comparison with Art, where like it doesn't drive you to root for him as much necessarily because he doesn't really want anything that much. But at the same time, like he really doesn't do like he really doesn't even do Zendaya dirty. It's just like him and Zendaya would have never worked out because like she wants he doesn't have that ambition. He doesn't love the sport like she does. He doesn't have the ambition like she does, and like he kind of he sees everything for what it is. He clearly has the best understanding of all three characters, himself included. Like he has a good understanding of who everyone is at their core. And I think it's also so one thing that's really interesting, I think, is in that first opening shot of Zendaya, we see first her look, she looks at him first with the shades on, and then turns and looks at Art. And I think that that says everything because she looks at uh Patrick with the shades on and takes the shades off to look at Art because she hides the way she looks at Patrick, but shows the way she looks at Art. because I think the film makes it very clear that Patrick is the one that Zendaya actually has feelings for. He uses that really like that high soprano, like church choir music for really extreme heightened emotion, with the first one being after the injury when her emotions are so heightened, and then brings it back when Patrick and Tashi have sex. And I think that really shows that he was the one that she was actually in love with, and because he's also the only guy probably ever who's ever walked away from her. Like Art would never walk away from her, and like he's really the first guy I think probably ever who's actually walked away from her. And someone who's like competitive and has an ego like Tashi, like that definitely plays a role. And so I think that's a very I think one of you asked earlier what the most interesting relationship was. I think both of you said Art and Art and Patrick, but I actually think it's Tashi and Patrick is the most interesting dynamic for me, because I think it's the most complex one, and it's the one where the least is kind of said about it. And yeah, I think at the end of the day, like
Mm.
even on a rewatch, I was like, you know what? Like he really is not that flawed of a character. Just like kind of lazy.
Yeah, I think he has a bit of an ego to him
He
from
does.
like that self-awareness.
He's a
But
cocky
he's
guy compared to Art.
yeah.
He
Um,
is.
he's obviously we see him at the start. We think he's like homeless. We think he's, but we think he's this really struggling tennis player. But I'm pretty sure he has really rich parents. He just doesn't want to use their money from. I think that's what it is. But yeah, I
Real quick,
think
I assume anyone in the sport of tennis, unless it's like addressed, probably has money. Like not a lot of like lower middle class and poor people playing tennis. If we're being honest.
yeah, true. Um, Yeah, but for me, Patrick and Art's relationship is just it's the most like intimate out of the film in I guess like a more subtle way, not like an in your face way, but it's just all the things lining up. It's just I think their relationship just works so well together. Um
Mm. And they
through kind of
embrace
the
at the
body
end as
language.
well.
Yeah. They
I feel like almost Patrick is almost subconsciously, maybe, I don't know if he's doing it on purpose, like try to sabotage their relationship, because you said like there's no like why would he throw the game. Like I feel like he's maybe more focused on
mm,
like try to get Art away from Tasha, maybe.
yeah, he just wants to be with
Tashi.
Art at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just
I think
about them two trying to get
I think there's
away
a
from
possibility that might be the
he's just trying to
motivation.
get Art away from her, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, the
Yeah, I think
ending's
that's
an
a sweet as well.
interesting one, but it works well.
Yeah, so for me, the ending kind of fell flat on the first watch. Like I felt like it was kind of like what? Like that's it? Like I don't know, it just felt like everything kind of worked out too nicely for like I don't know. I was expecting more like something that left me with a little more to think about and like have kind of more I don't know, like it just kind of was like, oh, like it was a little too much like a happy ending for me, considering like how flawed the characters are and the direction that I thought it was kind of going. I had a feeling it was going to end somewhere like that, but I felt like it was too. I'll put it this way: I love how in the beginning and the end it's so extended amount of time without dialogue. I think that's a big strength. I will say this: that I like the ending more on a rewatch, not as much for Art and Patrick, but I like Tashi's end where when we see her playing tennis in her younger introduction and she yells come on because that's when she's like in the heat of the match of tennis and like a love of the game, and in the end she says come on, which I didn't get because I'm like she's angry, and then she like
Mm,
smiles. I was confused by it. And then on a rewatch I'm like oh, because then she talks about like her love of the game and her love of that competition when they're younger, and then that comes back because that's like her once again caught up in the moment of just like because she's very like kind of calculated for most of the film and she's just so caught up in the tennis. And the first time we genuinely see her like amazed by something is that third act. And then she yells it in the heat of the good tennis. So I thought that was like a great setup and payoff and kind of misleading ending because it's totally a misdirecting us in terms of the ending. And most audiences are probably not going to realize that's what she meant, which I think is makes the film more interesting. And so yeah, I liked her ending a lot more in a rewatch. The guy's ending is still kind of like I don't know, it didn't really hit for me as much. But what'd
that's
you
fair.
think?
That's
Mm.
fair. I really like it. Just overall ending. I think it has enough ambiguity to it to keep me like really interested and really thinking about it from like both perspectives, from the guy's perspective and from hers. But yeah, I think it ended at the perfect moment.
I haven't had the chance to rewatch it yet, but coming out of it, I mean, I had a theory initially that it was just in Tashi's head almost, like it was what she wanted to happen, like she wanted them to stop fighting. And I thought there was maybe like a surreal moment because there's another moment earlier in the film when they're in the hotel and Tashi sees Patrick walk past in the window and he's wearing the t-shirt that he was wearing when they broke up, which I
I
was a bit
told you.
confused because I'm pretty sure it was years later. So it didn't really make sense. And then when Art notices them like sitting at the table, he looks away and looks back and they're like gone. And I don't know, it felt like a bit of a surreal like scene, as if it was almost their like insecurities about like the relationship kind of coming through rather than something that was actually happening. So I kind of felt like the ending might not be like as straightforward as it's like showing, but I've not had a chance to rewatch it, and I'm not really sure about that theory anymore. But that's just what my initial thoughts coming out of it were.
It's an interesting
Um,
interpretation, actually.
yeah, I want to see that hotel scene again because there was a bunch of stuff that I feel like there was maybe more going on. But yeah, going on to the what you were talking about, tennis is kind of like the it's kind of an upper class sport. Like there isn't like you were saying that it's not going to be like somebody that's poor like being in it, and I feel like the like score that Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor have along with this kind of contrasts that because it's a like kind of techno like house score. Like it's not something that you usually associate with the kind of like properness of tennis, and I think that's the contrast works so well, especially with that because I feel like what you were saying with this start, Alex. Like there's like clear Italian kind of influences here. Like this is it's kind of an Italian thing at least, from my view that like kind of like Argento would do, like just throw in random scores like into his movies that like don't necessarily like seem to like fit the actual like story or like tone of it.
That's,
He would just have like
that's
the
why it works
confidence
so
to like
well.
throw it in. Yeah, he would just throw in like rock songs like over like murder scenes and stuff.
So funny
And I
on
feel like
Argento
that's what
scores.
it's like doing here. Like he's throwing like this like techno house music over this really like almost proper sport and like fancy upper class like things about it. And it's like music that isn't usually associated with that. It's more focused on like the very sweaty and like personal side of it that you get again kind of going away from like that he doesn't care about the tennis, he just cares about like the like sweaty side of it and like the sexiness of like the sport and like the kind of music kind of focuses more on that. So I think that like the score is so good with this. I mean that's their second. I know they worked on Bones and all because I really like the score on that. I don't know if they've worked on Guadagnino's films before that, but I really like this partnership that they're kind of forming.
Keep it going.
Yeah,
Guadagnino's got like so many projects lined up. He's like 5 in the can at the moment that he's announced. I know. I think his next one is with Separate Rooms, Josh O'Connor and Lea Seydoux. Or no, maybe it's another one. I know that's one of them. I think there's another one maybe before that. But yeah, the
he has
fact
one
that
coming out this year. Like he has another film coming
is
out
it
this year. I'm
And so,
pretty sure.
is it called Queer? Isn't it?
I think that's it.
I think that's it. But yeah, Separate Rooms. I'm glad he's going back with Josh O'Connor because I think they work very, very well together. I'm gonna look that up. I remember it's quite a good
It is
cast.
queer. Queer's coming
Daniel
out.
Craig, yeah, that's it, and Jason Schwartzman.
Yep. He's doing a 93 Spielberg.
or a
uh,
24 I forgot
Yorgos.
Yorgos.
Yeah. Oh my
But yeah,
god. What?
Oscar, I know you said you prefer the score to Dune, so
Yeah, I
That's
do.
fucking insane, dude. I was just about to praise this score, but holy
Dune
shit.
2, not 1. 2, not 1.
Dude, that's just fucking insanity. I'm about to praise this score, so I don't want to like shit on it, but like, dude, the
In
variety
in
range
terms of
of
like
Dune
the
score, you're gonna
elevation.
compare it to a fucking nightclub beat. What are we talking about here?
No, in
I'm
terms of
an
the
instrument.
elevation of scenes, this just is so good. like, don't get me wrong, Dune 2 is still amazing, but this is something else.
This
It's
the
so
worst
it almost out of
on the
pocket for
podcast.
a tennis film, like you were saying. But yeah, best score of the year for me so far.
This is
And best film of the
easily
year for me so far.
Oscar's
The only
worst
thing
take.
about this argument, I don't like that people are treating Dune score as if it's like a normal score. It's like it's very out there on its own, like in a way, kind of the big space, like Outer Worlds kind of sounds.
I have
So that's the
many
only thing I
Dune
don't like.
tracks. Sorry, we're saying?
No, so go ahead.
No, I have many Dune tracks I still am listening to on repeat. There's like 10 plus Dune 2 tracks that are just like incredible. Like Challengers, there's like 2. And on top of the fact
Yeah,
that I
there's a couple of songs in the middle of Challenger soundtrack that like I skip. So that was like my main point. I've been like between Dune and this. It's like the first two and like the last.
and why did they think we needed to hear the tennis sound effects and like pauses in the score on the soundtrack? Like it's just
Oh, yeah, there's an iPhone alarm in there.
yeah, like why? But yeah, I think it is a good time to talk about the top 3 most important things in film. Despite Oscar dropping his worst take in the history of Shot by Shot podcast, we are
A
going to
lot
give
of people agree with me.
yeah, congrats. There's a lot of idiots in the world. Congrats.
I think you're forgetting about Will's Napoleon over
Barry
what was it
Lyndon.
put over? Barry
Yeah, no,
Lyndon.
that probably is the all-time worst.
If Will was on here right
I
now,
was
there
just
would
saying
be
this
such
is
a heated
Oscar's
argument
worst.
because he hated it.
Yeah. Wait, sorry. What would you say?
Will hated the film, so there'll be a big heated debate if he was on here right now.
Yeah, I pretty sure he was not a fan, but luckily
No.
he probably at least understood. I probably disagree with a lot that he has to say on the film, but at the same time, I'm sure he is a sane enough human being to know that Dune 2 is a better score. But anyway, let's say some positives about this score now because I did like it. I think that Luca Guadagnino, like I said, he just lets you sit with the music at times, and I think that like a true Italian filmmaker understands the importance of music. But I do have a criticism, and that is that he's good at using music. I think he's not great at needle drops. I think when he cues the music and drops it in, there's some great moments of it. Like when Tashi first enters, that's great. That slow mo walk, which is early on, it's like a super tight lens and super slow motion of Art and Tashi walking out towards the beginning. Like that's the best track of the film. That's some of the best slow motion use in any film recent years. Like that's just perfect music and picture. But he does awkwardly kind of drop the music at times, especially the fast-paced techno score. I often like when the score, like the moments where he changes that score, I think almost always work perfectly, and where the score ends up always is perfect. Just the needle drops themselves, I think, feel a little awkward at times and don't always work perfectly, which I think is why some people have kind of criticized the score a bit, which is funny because there actually is a lot of this movie that has no score. Like, there's not near as much music, I think, as people are making it out to be. But I think that, yeah, I like how he uses the score a lot. He uses it, it really does energize the film. And, like, if I had watched this film 2, 3 years ago, like probably 3, 4 years ago, I would have been very critical of the techno score. I've warmed up a lot to computer generated scores in the recent
Techno
years.
scores are so good, so good.
It'll never be my preference, but like I do, there are like I've grown appreciation for them for sure. And he definitely like the score I think is a huge strength of this film and how he uses it. And I think the score changes on story beats, especially work really well in this.
I kind of get where you're coming from about the need drops because there are a lot of kind of sharp cuts into the score and cut out of it that do kind of catch you by surprise, and I did pick up on that. I don't necessarily dislike it, because I just think it works in the context of the film as a whole. But yeah, I can see where you're coming from because I do definitely notice it. But yeah, not as a bad thing for me. I just elevates that. It's just the difference between those kind of scores. I think this score is better Dune 2 as a whole, and I guess Dune 2. I know there's a lot of new sounds that Zimmer put in but obviously there's the backing of having done the first one, which is the similarities. But just in terms of the way that those scores elevates their films, this one just elevates the scenes and the moment better than Dune 2 for the most part.
Do yourself a favor, exit the video now.
Because I love the film, but there's only like 2 scenes that I can think of that are in Dune 2 that I'm like, oh, this score is so good. In comparison as well to the first one, which I think uses it and has a much better effect than 2.
I have no comeback for that insanity. I'm just like, did you watch a movie? Did you see Dune 2? Did you buy a ticket?
I saw it 4 times.
Did you
Like the
Spitfire watch
Harkonnen
it?
Arena
Like, what
scene
did you
and
do?
Kiss the Ring is like the 2 standouts, and I can't. Maybe the Harvester Attack. I can't necessarily think of anything else. Like it was really, really good.
Worm
Ride
Racing.
Him and Zendaya on top of the hill. We have
in terms of elevation,
attack. We have the Harkonnen Arena. We have the arrival in the south. We have the ride to the south. We have the kiss the ring at the end. Like that's just 6 off the top of my head.
In terms of, like I said, in terms of singularly elevating a scene and how different it is to what tennis is, it just stands out to me more than Dune 2.
All right, so what we've learned today is that Oscar Spitfire watched Dune 2 on camera. He did not actually watch the movie. If you decide to, we recommend check out our Dune 2 episode. Just keep in mind, Oscar did not watch the
movie. He just watched them all. He watched them all in cam. He was just lying about going to the cinema.
Oh my god!
He watched the movie with headphones in.
Oh
I do agree that like Dune 2 compared to Dune 1 does not have those like big moments with the score or as good as Dune 1, but I'm not putting over challengers just for that.
Don't agree, but like after Oscar's take, that's the coldest take ever. So.
Oh dear. It is what it is. It is what it is.
Does anyone have anything to add, though, on Challengers?
Go see it. It's great. It's absolutely worth your time and everybody's money. Just keep on funding Luca projects for the future, please. Just get this man on everything.
Oh, real quick, I actually think... Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I've ended. You go.
Yeah, no, I actually think it's going to kill it at the box office. Like, I know me and Oscar, like, kind of think different views, like perspectives on this, but I think that like sex sells, and I think because of that, like this is gonna make.
I think this is good. I think this is gonna do well. I wasn't necessarily saying like go see it as in it's gonna do badly, but the thing is, when we're having a discussion about sex and things like that, Poor Things and Saltburn we mentioned.
Yes, exactly.
Neither of which I don't think many people had ideas about how sexual they were going to be. And I still stand by the general audiences. And this is coming from my general audiences as people who maybe aren't necessarily more into film on like Instagram and social media and comments and stuff like that. Still, the majority think it's anti it and just see it as pointless. There's definitely a proportion out there like myself who are definitely more pro it, because it's an expressive form of love and anything. I think it elevates characters in an incredible way, like we've seen with Poor Things, maybe not Saltburn, but yeah, and this is absolutely another example of that.
Yeah. Please let us know, like in the comments, what you think, because like it's not that me and Oscar disagree. We just kind of have different perspectives on what we think the taste of the audience are. Because I think like my mindset is like the first thing in marketing across anything is sex sells. I think like sex is always going to be a selling point, and I think that like Saltburn, I think people didn't know quite what they were getting themselves into. I think Poor Things, people like very much knew that film was going to be pretty sexual. Maybe not to the degree that it was, but I just think so. I think that also, real quick, I forgot to mention this. I think sex in film to Luca Guadagnino is violence to Quentin Tarantino because sex and violence historically are the two most censored things in film history. And I think today they've become bigger selling points for sure. And I think that they're always, like I said, they're no matter what, there's always going to be a crowd of people who are critical of both of them. Like there's always going to be people who are anti-sex in film and anti-violence in film. But I think Oscar's perspective on it is like I think social media finds out what you disagree with and like feeds that to you to get people worked up. Because I personally think like sex is a selling point in film, and I'm not like anti-sex, like we need to cut it out. I just think like from like an objective, trying to be objective perspective, I think that sex is a way to sell your movie, not something that's going to hurt it in terms of like obviously like, there's always going to be critics, but I think sex and violence in film more often than not are selling points more than they're something that's going to turn people away from the movie. So I think that what's up?
That's a fair point, specifically for this film, because when the trailer for this film first came out, the image of Zendaya and the two boys kissing an egg was everywhere. And that's I guess that's part of the why it's selling so well. Zendaya is a big selling point of this film.
There's a big controversy about Spider-Man's girlfriend kissing other guys, especially around this.
I don't get it. It's only Tom Hollander's Zendaya that people have a problem with that with. I swear, nobody can make about any other actor and any other actor's wives or husbands or whatever. It's only those two.
That's funny.
But yeah, I guess. Incredible film.
Yeah, I think that real quick. Let us know what you think because I don't think that there is as big of like the anti-sex crowd. I think the numbers like in like 2 top 5 most watched movies on Letterboxd last year were Saltburn and Poor Things. So I think it's something both sex and violence because I think they're the same conversation pretty much when in film. And I think that I think it helps sell the movie more than it does hurt it. But I'm curious what most people think.
Yeah, I think from a someone who's more into film, I can absolutely understand that. Like Letterboxd, maybe that's the more demographic that's going for. I can understand that they're less that, but I think like general audiences, I think, yeah, maybe it's just the side of social media, I guess.
Yeah. But I think that wraps up our episode on Challengers. Let us know what you think in the comments below about all this stuff. Who were you rooting for? Were you team Art? Were you team Patrick? Or were you like fuck all of them? Let us know in the comments below. And we'll be back. We have another very great episode for you next week. So make sure to subscribe, hit the notification, all that stuff, and we'll be back.